Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Fix Problems. I'm Blaine Pardoe, award winning and best selling author. And I want to welcome you to this week's show where we're going to be talking to Eric Buer about his book, The Ghosts of Baghdad. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, as always, we always open with a review of the book. I took it with me on vacation and read through it. This book had me hooked at Cobra helicopters when I was a kid. I was fascinated with the Cobra because of the heads up display where you could turn your head and the guns would follow. I was obsessed with the freaking helicopters, and I learned so much more about them reading your book. But first, we'll get into a review of the book because I really enjoyed it. As I said before, this book had me at Cobra Helicopters and the Marine Corps. There's a long history of books written by witnesses to war, and Ghosts of Baghdad proudly joins those. This book chronicles the missions that the author undertook during the invasion of Iraq as a Cobra pilot. While there are several narrative books out about the war, we really haven't been treated to the story of the combat helicopter pilots in this conflict. Ghosts of Baghdad is a mix of nail-biting threats, enticing background information, and even a hint of Top Gun, all of which puts the reader in the tight confines of a Cobra cockpit with the author. The author draws you in from the start and takes you on a tail-spinning wild ride that rivals many of the other memoirs of war. So that was my review of your book, Eric.
Well, I thank you very much for number one for taking the time to read it, and then taking some time to provide some insights into it. I appreciate it.
It was fun to read. You've got a really great grasp of narrative, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, I was wondering if you'd tell folks a little bit about your background, because your background is fascinating all on its own.
So, I came in the Marine Corps like a lot of young people do. I was, in my case, I was a 19-year-old in college and looking for my next kind of big adventure. Not that I was looking past college, and I ran into those silver-tongued devils we call recruiters, and he basically everything I asked him about, he said we could do that, and you can do that. And so I graduated from college, and I had the pleasure of going to Quantico to Officer Candidate School a couple times, and yeah, it was fantastic. I had an opportunity to go to flight training, and everything just kind of fell into place after that. And it was not something I thought I would do for a career. I did it for that kind of what everyone does, a little sense of adventure and something different. And then the adventure never stopped, so I kept with it, and it was I was really fortunate to be able to stay in the Marine Corps as long as I had.
It was absolutely fascinating to read your book. What compelled you to write this book? I mean, there haven't been a lot of discussions about the helicopter missions in Iraq, and this was fantastic to read.
Well, thanks. I thought about it for some time, and I'd read some really good books. I do a lot of reading, and I said to myself, we've got to find a way to capture these experiences. And selfishly, I began talking to my co-pilot, my wingman at the time, and his co-pilot, and my squadron commander, and executive officer, and my group commander, and every one of them had a different story. But they were all just amazing to listen to these people just recount things that I was kind of sometimes privy to, sometimes actually there with them. Um, and so I owed a responsibility to them to capture this story. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's told through my lens, and I wasn't there to see everything. Um, but I felt I owed it to us. I owed it to all the Marines I served with to tell their story kind of collectively.
I was really drawn into this. Now, the title of the book was interesting because when I saw the Ghosts of Baghdad, I was like, okay, I'm not. I know at some point in the book this will come up, and it comes up actually often. I was wondering if you might, for readers who are going, so what's this about? Is it a ghost story or what? If you could talk a little bit about who is the ghost.
Yes. Well, nothing scars deeper than a good dose of horror, and so in aviation, particularly those of us that spend a lot of time flying at night, it's it's just so unforgiving in so many ways. And whether it's, aircraft, whether it's my own limitations, whether it's weather, whether it's winds or terrain, in this case, enemy, I always felt I was being chased by a ghost wherever I was. I think it's natural. It's dark. You're kind of suffering in solitude. And, and I felt that kind of captured what we were all dealing with. We're all running from something. And, and in my case, sometimes it was imagined and sometimes it was certainly real. So the ghost of Baghdad just kind of jumped in my head, and I wouldn't let it go.
I got to tell you, there were some nail biting moments for me. I mean, I was white knuckled. You have a 3-page sequence in here where there's a chopper trying to land in the sandstorm. And it never dawned on me how terrifying that is. And I was literally reading it. I was ready to fall asleep, but I couldn't put that part down because I was like, I've got to see how is this landing going to happen? And is it going to happen well? Because it's terrifying. You can't see anything. All the different techniques you're trying to get a good view of what's going on. I mean, it's just harrowing. And you feel when you read your book that you are in the seat with, behind you as you're piloting this. So, I mean, it's really well done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There was, number one, when I put pen to paper and had thoughts, I knew a lot of things that happened to me were, a lot of my mistakes and the mistakes that I made and mistakes that I continue to make. Um, but as a crew, I had an incredible co-pilot. You had a chance to get some insights to Matt. And he was a brand new captain, and I was a pretty salty major at the time with thousands of hours. And every time I'd screw something up bad, he'd be like, he would just, and so would my wingman. We'd sit down and we'd talk about it. We'd pull ourselves together, and they'd look at me like, "Let's go, Major. You're the lead. Let's go. We trust you. We know we made some mistakes, but we got to go do this again." And so their confidence in me and my confidence in them really let us learn quickly, and then put mistakes like the one you just referenced, put it in our toolkit, and then just don't ever do it again.
Well, a good friend of mine is an Army helicopter pilot. He's moved over to fixed wing after he flew in Afghanistan, but he was giving me a kind of a rundown on various helicopters and the various control differences. I think a lot of people tend to think, oh, if you can fly one helicopter, you can fly all helicopters. He's like, it's not that easy. The handling, performance, etc., is very different. And even your description of, there is no auto hover, in the Cobra, you're hands on the whole time. Um, you put that level of what I would call technical detail into the book, and there's a lot of it because we have to understand the nomenclature of the Marine Corps in order to be able to understand some of the missions you were on, etc. And I think you did a really good job of that. How do you balance that? Because some authors, I will tell you, they go so deep into the technical detail, the story gets lost. You didn't do that. So I'm kind of curious, was there a lot of editing work that went into that, or did you have somebody that assisted you in kind of balancing that out for the average reader?
So, it's something I dealt with the entire time. I didn't want details to be a distraction, but I wanted people, to understand details and try to, give you details as the chapters went on and give you additional details. So you felt, the intent was so you felt more and more like it was your cockpit, because it is your cockpit. You climb in with me and Matt, and we go fly. So as details come out, hopefully the reader is educated a little bit on it, and they're educated in a way that motivates them to understand the story a little bit better. I did have a great editor. My publisher is Ballast Books. They're fantastic, and I had an editor who we talked about that. But he wasn't an editor who wanted me to change anything. He would do a lot of technical editing for me, but then we just discuss a few things. And you're absolutely right. There's a time when there's just too much. There's too much. I never consider myself like a Tom. There's too much Tom Clancy sometimes in books where you can get bogged down. So I try to balance it. I hope I did. I hope I balanced it, to inform and educate the reader, but not getting off the storyline. So that was my intent.
I got to tell you, there's parts of this I'm going to be lifting for the science fiction series I do about land and sea because some of the detail was really useful. So it's that good, and I think it's a tightrope you have to walk, and I think you straddled it just perfect.
Well, thank you. It was, and there was a lot of just thought on what I think the reader would need to know. There's certain details, maybe over the top a little bit, but I hope I've, informed them and motivate them to learn a little bit more about marine aviation.
Well, you know what was funny? Because I always view books, even when because I write military history books as well. And when you're writing true stories, it's hard to write about the character of the people involved because they're real people. And sometimes real people are interesting characters, sometimes they're not interesting characters. And sometimes it can become almost a mechanical thing. They're going through and doing their job. Their job just happens to be piloting a helicopter, etc. You had one scene in this book that told me a great deal about your character, and as well, I think was my favorite scene in the book, and it wasn't a combat scene. It was the one where you landed at the academy to extract some souvenirs. And I'm not going to ruin the book for everybody, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that scene because to me that was like, okay, that was where you became a real life human being. Like I totally identified with that.
Yeah, that was not my finest hour.
Well, but it was great.
Well, yeah, so yeah, it was interesting because we didn't know, no one knew that the first, the first Operation Iraqi Freedom window was closing, but we could sense it. And then when we got up into Tikrit, I was fortunate to have, a three ship. I had two Cobras, my Cobra and my Wingman. And of course, I had a Huey, which is an amazing way to have a Dash 3 because they can do so much work. And yeah, I went looking for some souvenirs at the Iraqi Air Force Academy, and yeah, one of my superstar crew chiefs, just and they said he's doing what? He's landing and doing what? And so and my Dash 3, he said we're going to go find out what he's doing before he gets himself in trouble. And out, I said out pops a crew chief. He looks at me, looks me right in the eye, and sort of says, what the f are you doing? And then I knew all of it. I'm like, well, that's as I look back, that's hopefully the type of environment I wanted to foster, particularly with NCOs that could challenge anybody for doing stupid things. Um, but yeah, I just had this sense that there was something there. We needed something to touch and feel. I was, like I said, I wasn't looking for, Nazi gold or anything, but I was looking for a flag or something we could just put our hands on. And yeah, there's nothing like getting told to get your stuff, get your stuff in a bag by a young corporal or sergeant to make you realize that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Well, I mean, there's a certain element of risk to it too. I mean, you're climbing out of the cockpit and going through this academy looking for souvenirs, and I was like, dude, are you sure this is safe? Yeah.
No, I wasn't, and just me with, and I tell my co-pilot, I said, listen, anything goes south. I took my M4 with me. I said, anything goes south, just pull pitch and go, and just tell him Major went crazy. I don't know what he did. He just told me to land, and he went. So, take care of yourself. And so, yeah, it was not not my finest hour, but yeah, I mean, you gotta learn from your mistakes.
You know what though? That was the great part of it is that made the entire piece about who you were as a person 100% genuine. And so it made me identify with you as the character in the book. And so to me, it was one of my favorite scenes. I went over it twice because I was like, this is really a cool thing. And it's the kind of stupid shit I would do. So, and I think that's what any reader reading it would go, yeah, I could see myself doing that, so it was really interesting. There's been a number of books that have come out about the war, but honestly, not that many when you get down to it. More, I think, on the Afghanistan side of things rather than Iraq. There just haven't been a lot of books about this particular invasion. And I'm kind of curious what your thought is on that. Did you have any problems getting this book published? things along those lines, because there just haven't been a great deal written about this from a narrative perspective.
No, I think you're right. So when I said I was going to do it, I sat down and I wrote a pretty detailed, you know, proposal. Right? Included a chunk of an outline, some writing, and I farmed it out to publishers. And I was surprised that they all came back and said this is something we'd be interested in doing. Because I hadn't found a lot. I'd found some really good Army officers. A guy named Alan Mack wrote Razor 03, great book about bringing the kind of the horse soldiers into Afghanistan in 2001, 160th SOAR pilot. And I looked and I couldn't find anything. It wouldn't have deterred me if there was more written about it. But then it went back to me understanding I had to tell the story. It needed to be told. And like I said, once I began talking to people, they were like, "We're on board. Like whatever you need from me, you let me know." And that's when I scheduled literally hundreds of hours of interviews, and just talked and really listened more than I talked. Just listened to their stories and helped me fill in the gaps where I had gaps.
It was phenomenal. Now, one of the things I liked about the book too is you wove in a lot of call signs for characters, etc., that made it really good. Your own call sign being Ferris, which is a play off your last name, which I thought was really good. I'm kind of curious, as a civilian who writes this stuff, is there some sort of ritual in getting a call sign in
Oh,
in the Marine Corps?
there is. There's absolutely. And as we talked earlier, um, if everything happens for a reason, and normally your call sign happens when you're not at your best, um, and you can't shake it. You just can't shake it. I talked about Howdy in there, one of our flight leads, good friend of mine, Brian Kennedy, and he was a lieutenant, and he was doing a flyover for a bunch of generals on Camp Lejeune, and someone from the stands waved at him, so he waved back, and the commanding general, he was beside himself. I want that guy. I want his name. I want Butts now, type of thing. And so he got the call sign Howdy because as he looked up, there's this Cobra pilot supposed to be moving the cannon around, who's waving back at the crowd like, Howdy, what's going on down there? So and they go on, and you can't shake them. And I know people who try to, I'd love to be Maverick or the assassin or something cool, but you lose a lot of credibility if you attempt to change your call sign.
I mean, it's difficult to always weave those in because the call sign becomes the character as well as their name, and you have to kind of balance it. And you did a good job with that. I found that fascinating. What books are you reading right now?
So I'm tearing through some old books right now. I just reread Low Level Hell, which is an incredible book about Vietnam. Reread Chicken Hawk again. I wanted to stay kind of in the aviation side. Read a bunch of books on Afghanistan. Just again reread a couple books in Ramadi. Echo in Ramadi is an amazing book written by another great writer and former Marine. So right now I'm trying to stay with current pieces, and then I'll read, like I always read, some Robert Ludlum type stuff. Just when I'm getting not bored, when I have to put down a book, I want to pick up another one, something that keeps me, something that's kind of fun and a little bit adventurous.
Were you working on anything currently?
I am. So um, you may or not noticed, in the end of the book, I introduce my second book, which is Devil in the Triangle. And so, the Sunni Triangle goes from Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit down to Baghdad and out into the Anbar province. Al Anbar province, of course, a very dangerous place with cities of Ramadi and Fallujah. And my next two deployments, I would fly out of an air base right between Ramadi and Fallujah. And I'm just going to tell one more story that covers these two deployments and some of the same people, because no one really got a break for the next several years when it came to flying in Iraq and Afghanistan.
That was a real. I compliment your publisher in doing that. I've got a publisher that does the same thing where they'll put the kind of lead into your next book at the end of the first book, and that was a nice bonus to get that because it was like, oh, there's more to this, and there's more coming.
Yeah, they've been great. Again, Ballast Books. They do great work, and they're really, sometimes you don't know. You're an author. You understand it. You don't know when to be a zealot and really advocate for yourself, or simply say, these folks know better than I do. And we were able to balance it. There were certain things I just weren't. I was not going to let go, and there was certain things I let go because I knew they were professionals, and this is what they do. So they were very helpful along the entire trip.
It is tricky, and I don't think people realize how much work authors have to go through just to promote their books. Even if you've got a top-notch publisher, it's you have a responsibility to promote your book, and it's a challenge.
You're absolutely right. Uh, I've had an opportunity to work with a publicist that was recommended to me here out of DC, and they've been great. They've again, you're a testament to what you and I are talking this morning, which is great.
Yeah,
And I had a chance to talk to. I really enjoy these two. I love good intimate talks where we can just kick back um, and it's all good. But yeah, I've also had a chance to talk on some pretty high end shows, which has been really exciting just to meet these people and talk to them. But yeah, they've done a good job, and I appreciate their help too.
great. Well, how can folks get in contact with you?
So they can go on my website. They go to ericbuer.com. Uh, they can go to Ballast Books. But they can get contact with me easy. It's just going to my website, and I got a place people need to contact me. They want me to uh, sign a book. They want to sign a book. If you go to Ballast Books, my publisher, I'll absolutely sign a book for you. It's too easy, and I really love doing it. Um, and then again, through the website, you can contact me with anything folks need.
Great. Well, I know you've got a limited time schedule here, and I don't want to
Yeah.
keep you over it all. Watcher, do we have any questions out on the web?
We didn't get any questions there, but I have a question. Or I
Absolutely.
actually have two, but we'll keep them brief. So I didn't get to finish the book, unfortunately, but I am at about chapter 3, and what I was struck with consistently throughout the first 3 chapters was an eloquency in your writing. And I mean that both as a compliment, but my question is, who are the authors that inspire you?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I've you know I don't have one in particular. It's interesting. I've had to read so much history over time. Classics. Obviously like Thucydides and Clausewitz and Sun Tzu, and I've been forced over my professional career to dig into those. But I really enjoyed stylistically like the Robert Ludlum type books where uh, there's adventure in it. Um, and then I said, I talk about, I just mentioned Alan Mack's book, Razor 03 about Afghanistan. When I read his, like it was so compelling, right? It was real and it was compelling. Um, and then when I read, I served in Somalia. I call it pre and post Black Hawk Down. When I read Black Hawk Down, I read it in the Philadelphia Inquirer years ago, before the book even came out, and I was just, it's intoxicating to read that book. In the movie, of course, it's for me. That's the most that's the modern war movie of my generation, certainly, just because of the understanding of the air crews and the ground crews and the forces on the ground and those interactions. So, yeah, I cut a pretty wide swath of who I read, and I tried to get too biased. Um, and then I have my own kind of way of thinking, I in talking, and I think it kind of comes out in the book. Um,
Yeah, it's almost poetic. I really like it.
well, I appreciate that. Well, so I just got a note back from a retired Marine, Master Sergeant works for me. He's ordering a bunch more books, and he says, hey, I was 3 pages in, and I could hear your voice, and very very complimentary. He's just a great guy, and we played sports together, and he's long retired. But those type of interactions I get back from people are just they just mean so much to me. It's really it's just fantastic.
Well, good stuff. My second question is just kind of a question I have of all military pilots, and that is, do you feel any connection to the actual airframe that you were flying in, and do you know what's happened to it?
You do, I do, and I talk about it a little bit. You know, it's it's your life. It's my life for years. I don't know how many, I haven't added how many years I spent actually in the squadron, but it was, you know, just so much time in that, for me, in that particular flying an AH-1W or a whiskey. You just love the airframe, you love the platform. I could start it today. I wouldn't even need a checklist. I'm sure I could start it
Yep.
and take off and fly it. You absolutely feel it. And some pilots who've flown that same aircraft feel like they wear it. And I felt like I wore that helicopter. You don't really have to think too hard, and the airplane's doing what your brain's kind of telling it to do. Even very little nuanced things. When you're flying a little bit out of flight, your ball's not quite centered. You're flying a little bit out of balance flight. When the rotor blades aren't perfectly balanced, you hear that noise. When there's something
It's just
wrong
because
with the
you
engine.
can hear it.
You can hear it, you can feel it, you feel the vibrations. When there's bad vibrations, there's good vibrations. So yeah, I mean, it was my point of place of duty. That's where I spent my best time.
So do you know what's happened to it since then?
So those have all either been converted to AH-1Zs or they've been put in Davis Mountain.
Gotcha.
So all the whiskeys are retired. Yeah, I had a couple favorite bureau numbers I flew for years. And just some have died along the way, right? Some were shot down, some were destroyed, some were
Yeah.
crashed. So it's you lose a few of them, unfortunately, more than a few.
Wow, that is so cool. Well, folks, the book is Ghosts of Baghdad. It's written by Eric Buer. I recommend it highly. If you want, if you enjoyed Top Gun Maverick, you're going to enjoy this. It's just Top Gun Maverick with choppers. That's the
Well,
glorified version.
and less volleyball scenes. One would
Oh,
hope.
definitely no volleyball in there. But one good looting scene, so I enjoyed it. Eric, thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. You fitting us in today, and I hope a few of our viewers pick up your book.
Absolutely. Thanks to both of you, and thank you to all your listeners. I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.